Texas men's basketball picks up a road win in Ames. Texas softball stays an undefeated 8-0, and the NBA All-Star Game will take place this Sunday in Atlanta. All this and more coming up on College Crossfire.
Let's do this.
And their men's basketball team needs to stop social distancing themselves from fans.
But now it has been overdone to death. Playing, don't stop believing.
Bye-bye, Bucks. Bye-bye, Raptors.
All right, let's get to it. Welcome into College Crossfire. I'm your host, Jaxie Pigeon, and it looks like tonight's show is going to be a good one. First, let's introduce tonight's panel. On first base, we have our seasoned veteran, Daniel. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are y'all doing? And remember to wear a mask.
I'd love to see it. And on second base, we have Nicole returning for the first time this semester. How are you doing?
Doing awesome. Can't wait to get started.
Happy to have you. And on third base, we have making her College Crossfire debut, Sydney. Welcome in. How are you?
I'm doing great. Super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Love it. I'm really excited for tonight's show. But before we get started, I'm going to award some extra points. So first up, Sydney, you're going to start off with extra points because of your stellar background. Love the flags. And Daniel, you're going to get an extra point because of your homemade hype video. Loved it. Gave me a nice laugh. So appreciate you guys. All right, let's get to it. Just last night, Texas men's basketball took on the Iowa State Cyclones in Ames for the third to last regular season game. The Horns got off to a quick start, grabbing an 8-0 lead in under 2 minutes, only for the Cyclones to go on a 13-3 run and take the lead. Texas responded with a 17-0 run to give them a significant lead, with the score being 38-28 at the half. In the second half, Iowa State's closest margin to Texas was 8 points, and ultimately Texas took home this road win 81-67. Tomorrow, the Longhorns travel to Oklahoma for a matchup against the Oklahoma Sooners. In their last matchup against the Sooners in January, Texas took to the last seconds and made a nice 1-point loss, 80-79. So in tomorrow's matchup, what will be the key to victory for Texas to avenge their last loss against the Sooners? Daniel, start us off.
Well, before I start, remember to wear a mask, but I'm going to take it off just so that y'all can hear me better. But I think but not just against Oklahoma, I think for the rest of the season, Texas really need to start making those free throws. I mean, they're shooting 69% at the free throw line, and that's just not good enough. You're leaving too many points on the field. You're leaving too many points on the court, and it doesn't matter if it's against good basketball teams in the Big 12, which they have 2 left, or in the conference tournament, or in the Big 12, or in the NCAA tournament. You just can't leave points on the board, and Texas is not good enough to miss 10 or 11 free throws in a game and still coast to victory. So what doesn't matter who it is, doesn't matter who they're playing, just start making free throws. And a lot of other things will come together. But if you get to the free throw line, you do all that work and you go to the free throw line, you don't make them, that's demoralizing.
Sure, and I'm going to shout out my grandma here. It's her biggest pet peeve when anyone misses a free throw. It's free, is what she says. So that's definitely a big way that they're being defeated this year, I guess. Nicole, how are you?
Yeah, so I think Texas needs to find that consistency that they had at the beginning of the season. A few blunders in recent weeks. Texas has dropped in the rankings a bit, but they're definitely in it. The Longhorns have been pretty good on defense all season, but what I'd really like to see is the points off the bench coming a little more. Whether winning or losing, a lot of these games have been very, very close. So if the Longhorns have that little edge with some of their bench guys coming and scoring, that would be great. Too many times this season, Texas has gone up big, but then once the bench guys go in, that gap has been narrowed, and sometimes they've lost those games. So yeah, a couple of those guys just need to step it up.
Sure, just, not putting all the pressure on the few top stars. All right, Sydney, what do you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, the University of Oklahoma has taken a couple of really bad losses recently, including one in the Bedlam rivalry against Oklahoma State. With that being said, their swagger completely gone, and I think that this bodes really well for Texas. They have got to use this game to kick the Oklahoma Sooners while they're down. And with that being said, the key tactically for me is going to be getting the ball down into the paint early in the shot clock. And I'll say that again, early in the shot clock. Too often during their offensive possessions, they wait way too long for an opening to feed the ball into the paint and then are forced to throw up a three-pointer right at the end of the shot clock. And when this happens, and especially when they can't get it going from the three-point line, the game goes south very, very quickly for Texas. And I see this game as being a really great way for Texas to take revenge on the loss that they suffered to OU back in late January, and maybe get some momentum going into the Big 12 tournament as well.
Sure. And you make a good point with the early factor. I mean, it's coming down to the last seconds in a lot of these games, like just the previous game against Oklahoma, 80-79. I mean, that's last seconds, and they couldn't get it done. So we'll see how this game fares. But I think, Sydney, you're right. When Texas can hopefully capitalize on their Oklahoma's losses the past couple games. So, Sydney, you're going to get 3, Daniel 2, and Nicole 1. Next up. This past Monday, Texas women's basketball got close to taking down the number 6 Baylor Lady Bears, but ended up losing 64-57. However, just before that, this past Saturday, the Longhorns hosted the Oklahoma Sooners in Austin. As always, Charlie Collier had the best offensive performance of the night with 23 points on 10 of 14 shooting and had 7 rebounds. That was until she fouled out late in the fourth quarter, leaving her teammates with a 2-point lead at 59-57. The Sooners tied it up, and then the game went into overtime. Lauren Ebo went in for Collier, and the other players in Texas fought hard, but ultimately they fell short to the Sooners 68-63. With only one regular season game remaining, who can Texas count on to rise to the occasion in game-time situations without Charlie Collier? Nicole, start us off.
Sure. So first off, there's really no replacing Charlie Collier. She's an absolute beast, projected to go number 1 in the draft. But I'm really liking freshman Ashley Chevalier here. I think as the season goes on, her workload is definitely going to increase. She appears to be super popular among the teammates and the fans especially. She's probably not the most efficient scorer in terms of percentage on the team. However, she really moves that ball around, and she's great on defense. Had a couple of really, really great performances that led the Longhorns to victory in the last few weeks. So I think the team could really rally around her and use that leadership.
Yeah, sure. Chevalier is really great. She's from, Sierra Canyon, famous basketball school, and she's definitely stepped up, especially as a freshman this season. So good pick there. Sydney, what do you think?
Well, look, nobody, as he said, can come close to replacing Charlie Collier. As he said, number 1 pick in the WNBA draft. But for me, the only person who has played more minutes this season than Charlie Collier is Jo Allen Taylor. I think she's going to step up big, as she already has multiple times for this Texas team, especially as they're looking ahead to the Big 12 tournament. For the Longhorns this season, Allen Taylor is second in total points scored, second in assists, second in steals, and second in made three-pointers. She actually led the team with scoring 15 points against the Baylor Lady Bears, although I don't think that even a stellar performance from her would have changed the outcome of that game. But overall, I think season has been a bit of a struggle for Texas, but future is still very, very bright under Vic Schaefer. So I think they're going to have to lean on Jo Allen Taylor for the rest of this season. Note 3 of Texas's signees for next year were just named McDonald's All-Americans. So there's definitely lots to look forward with this team.
Sure. Definitely the younger players have been able to step up a little bit this season already. But Jo is great and a great leader for this team so far this season too. Daniel, what do you think?
I'm going to go a different route, I think, with one regular season game left. You're basically looking towards postseason play. And in those big tournament games, senior leadership is really, really important. Now, this team is quite young, but with Kira Lambert, with her experience on this squad, she plays a lot of minutes. Her points per games isn't that great, but she does lead the team in assists. She is constantly being the floor general out there. I love Jo Allen Taylor. I'm not saying that I don't like her as a player. Sometimes Jo Allen Taylor to me takes a little bit too many ill-advised shots, and I think And I think for Kara Lambert, when she's on the court, when Kara Lambert is on the court, those ill-advised shots tend to come down a little bit, and the team is a little bit more composed on the floor. Kara Lambert needs to be more active on the floor and allow very talented players like Celeste Taylor, Joanne Allen Taylor, Audrey Warren to start to exploit their talent and take up pressure away from Charlie Collier. Because right now Collier is on everybody's radar. Doesn't matter who you're playing, everybody's looking at Collier. It's time for other players to step up.
Yes, Collier is a beast. I just am obsessed with her. I think she's my queen, not going to lie. But you know what, Daniel? I'm going to have to give you the points on this one. Kyra Lambert, I mean, with all the experience she has coming from Duke, and I mean, she's on I think her 3rd degree now, so that's besides the point. But she's a great leader. She's taking all these younger people under her wing, and you can tell even on the sidelines how she, is engaging. And when you're in those, last minute situations, how she can help the team out in that way too. So Daniel, you're going to get 3, Nicole 2, and Sydney 1. Next up, this past weekend, Texas softball returned to the Diamond and welcomed Lamar, Sam Houston State, Mississippi State, UConn, and Ole Miss to Austin. The Longhorns' first game on Friday was against Sam Houston State, where they grabbed a 9-3 victory, and their second game was against Lamar, where they won 10-zip in 5 innings. On Saturday, Mississippi State gave the Longhorns a run for their money, but the Longhorns came out on top, winning 8-7. Finally, on Sunday, Texas had their highest scoring game of the tournament, beating UConn 16-2 in 5 innings, and then Ole Miss shortly after, winning 5-2. With the loss of Elish on the mound, Texas seems to have plenty of great talent. That being said, which pitcher do you trust the most on the mound to replace Elish? Sydney, start us off.
Well, after her performance against Ole Miss, I have to go with Molly Jacobson. During the 2019-2020 season, before she transferred to Texas from Ole Miss, she posted 166 strikeouts, finishing 6th in the SEC. In her first start for the Longhorns, as you mentioned, it just so happened to be against her old team, and I thought she did really well. She did put herself in a couple of tough situations with bases loaded, but is able to finish off the inning with 3 straight strikeouts. And I'm sure she was fired up to be playing against her old team. That fires me up too. There's nothing better than serving up a little bit of revenge against your old team. And I think she's going to be able to carry this momentum from her first start deep into the season for the Longhorns and come up really big when they need her.
Yeah, she definitely fought hard and got herself out of some tricky situations with a lot of full counts. Probably giving a lot of people, some extra stress, but as long as you can follow through, which she did, you're going to be successful. So that's a good pick. Daniel, what do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, no one is replacing Miranda Elish. Nobody. It's like saying who's going to replace Colt McCoy on the football field, and it's been 12 years and nobody has replaced Colt McCoy. So nobody's replacing Miranda Elish in the circle for Texas softball. But we can look at some players that can take over the game. And Sydney gave a really, really good answer right there. But I'm going to go with Cheryl O'Leary. Now, she's only a sophomore this year. I understand that. But she and when she pitched against Mississippi State last weekend, she did give up 6 runs. 3 of them were earned. But in the long term, these games are only going to help you, not hurt you. And we're very, very early on. We're very, 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 very early in the season, and you can already tell that Mike White is putting a lot of faith in Cheryl O'Leary already. I think she's going to be, if not this year, the next will be one of the best pitchers on this team. And Mississippi State is one of those one of the tougher opponents in the last 8 games that Texas played. And so, with Cheryl O'Leary on the mound versus a good Mississippi State team, I think Cheryl O'Leary can be a really good pitcher in the future.
Sure, and she's definitely gotten a lot of reps so far this season, and they've only played 8 games, but for a sophomore, it's not too shabby. Nicole, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm going to think a little bit longer term here. I'm going to take another freshman, Riley White, to take over. I don't think she's going to take over right away. Might be a little later this season. But I think with time, she's going to woo some of those coaches with her championship level play she's bringing over from high school. She was easily the MVP of the 18 and under national championship game. 19 strikeouts, 0 runs allowed against other top talents. She was even ranked number 7 in the class of 2020. So I'm not expecting her to settle for a bench or rotational role. I think she's coming for that top spot.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, just kind of the experience that she had in high school and like high competition. And now even starting as a freshman, it's just pretty crazy. They have, every age group represented on this team now. Molly being a senior. But I think long-term, Nicole, you're probably in the right spot. I think that she has a lot of potential. And while it might not be current, I think that like long-term, she'll be able to fill a role, maybe not to the extent of Elish, but ultimately can get Texas to a stronger, pitcher that they had in Elish. So in that case, Nicole, you're going to get 3, Sydney 2, and Daniel 1. And when we come back, the panel discusses Texas baseball in the NBA All-Star Game. You won't want to miss it.
Men's basketball looks for a key win against Iowa State. Women's basketball is tested against the number 2 team in the nation.
The Longhorns had a dominant pitching performance in the latter half of the game, led by Pete Hansen.
I get to say some of the most exciting words in football. The Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock. And picking for
Texas started the third with the lead and continued to gain momentum on defense.
Hello and welcome into the first social distancing college press box ever.
You're watching a live sports presentation of Texas Student Television.
It's a lovely evening in Austin. Texas Longhorns, Texas A&M Aggies.
This is a rivalry game, high intensity, high scoring.
Puck drop, we're off.
Both of these teams are very fast.
Big collision on the wall there. Now a little advantage for Texas. Shot in the middle.
Welcome back to College Crossfire. Let's take a look at the scoreboard. Leading the show, we have Daniel and Sydney tied with 7 points, and right behind them in second place, we have Nicole. All right, let's jump right back in. Last Wednesday marked the beginning of Texas baseball's 4-game series against BYU. They started off that series with a 3-1 win. They followed that win with another win, this time beating BYU 12-6. On Friday, Ty Madden threw 7 shutout innings and only allowed 1 hit, which led Texas to an 11-1 victory. In their final game of the week on Saturday, Texas was up 4-1 through 5 innings. That was until BYU rallied and added 5 runs to the board. BYU ended up holding on to that lead the rest of the game. Texas couldn't rally and fell short 5-4 to BYU in the series finale. So, with going 3-1 in this series, what are your takeaways from Texas v. BYU? Daniel, start us off.
Well, I think it's just one of those series that makes you go, okay, we're fine. Texas baseball is fine. And that was definitely not where the program was before the BYU series. Remember the 0-3 start to the season. I never thought the college baseball classic was indicative of how good this Texas team was, because remember that week, the week leading up to that to that tournament, Austin was frozen. So I don't think the players actually got to practice. I'm not sure. I can't confirm. But even if they could, like, imagine having to go to Arlington on the weekend and face 3 top 10 teams after not having power and water in your house. So I never thought that weekend was indicative. But the BYU series, they struggled hitting wise in the first game, but especially the second and third game, they scored double digits. I think the hitting's coming back to a groove. The pitching is settling in, and is just one of those series that make you go, okay, we're fine. We still have a couple of weeks away from in conference play, and so we have time to adjust. And when Big 12 play comes, then we'll see how good this team is.
All right, Daniel, he's remaining calm. He thinks Texas baseball has it in the bag. Nicole, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree a little bit with Daniel there. Well, it was a pretty dominant series against BYU. I'm not going to jump the gun and say this beating up on the Mormons is anything indicative of what to see in the future. When facing these good pitchers like Ole Miss and Arkansas, like Texas was struggling to even get on the board. Like we got shut out one of those games, only scored 1 run. And even against BYU, we saw that a little bit at the beginning of the series. So until they're more proven against a couple of other teams, they're going to really have to pick this up if they want any chance in the Big 12.
Sure. So just kind of wait and see, and some tougher opponents, and then we can make some comparisons. Sydney, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret, as you said, that the Longhorns needed a serious pick-me-up after their disappointing play at the College Baseball Showdown. One huge positive, as you stated, was the Game 3 start for sophomore pitcher Ty Madden. I was really encouraged to see him perform so well with 11 strikeouts, 1 hit, especially after his lackluster performance against Mississippi State. But with that being said, I was concerned with their showing in Game 4. I thought that, as you said, the 4-0 lead in the 5th inning pretty much sealed it up, but total collapse in the 6th inning. I do think that this is a great opportunity for this team to take a look at the film, see exactly, what went wrong, and ensure that heading into the regular season, Big 12 play, and hopefully the postseason, they can ensure that this doesn't happen again. And obviously, if you want to compete with the best, it's crucial to, if you are able to get a lead, you're able to manage the game well enough to maintain that lead. So positives and negatives, I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not freaking out, but I'm also not, laying back thinking that everything's going to be, crystal clear from here.
Sure. And I think that's a good point there, that you can kind of use this time as a way to build upon what you did wrong. But the positive light, which was a really big positive takeaway, was Ty Madden in that game. I mean, he threw 7 shutout innings, and they only put one point on the board. So that's a lot of potential for a sophomore on that team. So Sydney, you're gonna get the points on this one. Next up, over the past few days, the Texas Tribune has posted articles that discuss the Eyes of Texas. From alumni emails showing threats to pull donations to university, and Texas football players coming out on social media saying they were forced to sing the school song, there's a lot to be discussed. Texas former defensive backs Caden Stearns said on Twitter, "My teammates and I got threatened by some alumni that we would have to find jobs outside of Texas if we didn't want to participate," end quote. His teammate, DeMarvion Overshawn, quoted Stearns' tweet in agreement and said, "No lies detected," end quote. That being said, do you think the university has any responsibility to respond to Texas athletes' social media posts about intimidation by alumni? Nicole, start us off.
Yeah, so first things first, times change. It is what it is. And in all honesty, if one song is what's keeping these donors attached to the university, they have no real loyalty to UT. And the whole debate on whether one song should be played is kind of a dumb hill to die on. And the administration, they could go either way on this. I don't think they have any real obligation to keep the song or remove it. However, I think their first responsibility is towards their student athletes. So whether they support these students' actions, personally, I think that they need to support their students' rights on whether they want to participate in this song, and they need to protect their students because that is their first responsibility.
All right, Nicole says the university should just protect the athletes. All right, Sydney, what do you think?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Listen, the fact of the matter is that these athletes signed to come play sports at the University of Texas. In doing so, they didn't relinquish their right to speak out about issues or injustices that they feel passionate about. I'm going to put a lot of blame around this situation on the university because they haven't handled this situation, I think, as well as they could have. To be frank, UT has a very scarred past surrounding their treatment of Black athletes, in particular on campus, going all the way back to 1956 when the first Black student was enrolled at the university. And, bottom line is UT needs to take a very clear stance that any harassment of athletes will not be tolerated. And if donors or alumni cannot get on board with that, then as Nicole said, I don't think that you should want those kind of donors or alumni attached to your university name anyway. So yes, I think that they absolutely have an obligation to protect their student athletes in this sense.
Sure. And as both of you guys have said so far, I mean, it's like if that's all you're holding on to, or is that really what the school's about? But we'll see. Daniel, what do you think?
Yeah, the question is whether the university has the responsibility to respond. I mean, there's no way to say that the university don't have the responsibility to respond, responsibilities to respond to that. And to the minimum they did, to their credit, they did issue a statement, which is the minimum that they could have done. And I think what the next step or the next couple of steps would be to find a way to prevent this from becoming a shouting match between the donors and the athletes. Their first responsibility is to protect the athletes. There's nothing wrong. I agree with that. I agree with everything that Nicole and Sydney said. But I think for this conflict to be really resolved is to clearly the donors are not hearing what the student athletes are saying, and I think the university needs to provide a platform for those stories and those the stories of what the student athletes have been through at Texas to the donors. And even if at that point the donors aren't willing to budge, then let them go. Just let them go.
Daniel's like, release them. But I'm going to have to give Sydney the points on this one again. I think that it's just the problem is not it's not only a current issue, it dates back, like she mentioned. And the university should, do something about that. And at least, they don't have to take a side, but at least acknowledge, which they're supposed to do soon. So Sydney, you're going to get the points on that one. And next up, this Sunday, the NBA All-Star Game is making its return at State Farm Arena in Atlanta. Originally, the 2021 All-Star Weekend was canceled due to COVID-19 and was to be held in Indianapolis. However, the league made a last-minute decision to move forward with the idea just in Atlanta instead. For starters, hailing from the Western Conference, we have Captain LeBron James, Steph Curry, Luka Doncic, Kawhi Leonard, and Nikola Jokic. And from the Eastern Conference, we have Captain Kevin Durant, Hookem, Bradley Beal, Kyrie Irving, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid. Each team also has their reserves, but who do you think got snubbed from the 2021 All-Star selection? Sydney, start us off.
Well, I'm going to have to go with Mike Conley from the Utah Jazz. I mean, the Jazz are clearly the best team in the NBA right now, even though they're not technically favored to win the championship. They are my personal pick to win the championship, especially after last year's playoff collapse against the Denver Nuggets. In fact, the Jazz are so good that they are 3.5 games ahead in standings to their closest competition. But the only reason we are not all talking about Mike Conley being snubbed is because he is the third best player on the Jazz behind Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. But, I mean, I would say that's pretty good company to have. Because of this, though, he is often overshadowed. But in his last 8 starts since coming back from a hamstring injury, he's averaged 14.8 points, 4.9 assists. And just in case you're not yet convinced, when Mike Conley is on the floor, the Utah Jazz are plus 17.4 points. But when he's off the floor, they're only plus 2.7 points. I understand the argument of not putting 3 players from the same team on the All-Star roster, but it's hard to argue against putting this 12-year veteran even as a reserve after his performance during the 2021 season.
Yeah, Conley is definitely a good pick for this category. And I think, like you said, you made a good point that he's kind of overshadowed with those 2 others at the top. Daniel, what do you think?
Well, since Sydney stole my answer and actually did a better number dump than I could ever do, then I have to go look elsewhere, and I have to go with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and definitely not because I spent 10 minutes last week learning how to pronounce his name for 1-0 Sports, but yeah, he's a young player. He's on the rise. He's averaging 23 points and shooting 62%. I mean, how can you not put a player like that in the All-Star game? I don't understand.
Yeah, a young star. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You got 2 Shays on the night, Shai O'Leary and Shai Gilgeous. Yeah. Nicole, what do you think?
So Bam Adebayo is my biggest snub. So he's not the best known guy, and he plays on a pretty below average Heat squad. So that certainly didn't help his voting chances. But if you watch him, this dude is straight up balling. He is leading as a center. He's leading his team in shooting percentage, and he's second as in assists on the team, right behind Jimmy Butler. And compared to other all-star centers, he runs the offense better than probably anyone else, except probably Jokic. And he's the only one who could defend every position on the court. Mike Conley and like those other guards you could say got snubbed are good, but compared to the guards that did make it, it's kind of a debate, but I think Bam is just really, really dominant at that center position. Especially, I get picking Julius Randle over him, but those other guys that were picked over him, like, I don't see it. So he deserves that center spot for the East.
Yeah, Bam Adebayo.
We all know centers don't play the All-Star game anymore.
They barely do anyways. But I mean, I honestly probably would have said Jimmy Butler. So like right under him, I would probably say Bam, but because it was the Heat with their run this past season, you just got to see a lot. So Nicole, you're going to get the points on this one. And coming up next, it's rapid fire here on College Crossfire. You won't want to miss it.
Sports Show,
the premier sports talk show on the 40 acres.
We're back.
Welcome back to College Crossfire. It's time for rapid fire, and in this round, points are worth double, and that means it's anybody's game. And before we jump back in, I'm going to tell you the score because that's why it's anybody's game. In first place, we have Sydney with 9 points leading the show. And right behind her, we have Nicole and Daniel tied at 7 points. So let's get to it. If Charlie Collier's performance on the basketball court didn't impress you enough, she is also the host of Center Court, which is a basketball show that she created where she interviews some big names in basketball. She is doing this in preparation to be a sports broadcaster after her playing career is over. She has already had on Jada Williams, Miles Turner, and even former Longhorn legend and current Brooklyn Nets standout star Kevin Durant. All I'm saying is, what can't this girl do? Anyways, if you had a podcast, which famous athlete would you have as a guest? Anybody can jump in.
Why is Charlie Collier out here stealing our jobs? What are we supposed to do now? But no, go ahead, Sydney.
No, a little bit of an older athlete, but still obviously very relevant. I would have to go with Steve Kerr. I think, especially for me, how much he supports women's sports in general. You mentioned Charlie Collier. I think he's consistently lifting up female athletes in general, like Becky Hammond, coach of the Spurs, as well as Kara Lawson, who was with the Celtics before she took the Duke head coach job. So absolutely, I would have him on my show. Just extensive basketball knowledge, as well as just a great person.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. I'd have to go with LeBron because besides being arguably the greatest basketball player of all time, he's been super involved in activism lately. And despite all the criticism he gets, being told to shut up and dribble, he's a well-articulated, well-researched person. And he's very, very passionate, and I think he's doing a lot of good, along with opening his school in Cleveland for underprivileged children. He's just doing so much good in the world outside of basketball, and I really admire that.
King James, right? Daniel, what do you have?
All right, I'm gonna go with Jeremy Lin because he's the first Asian American to play in the NBA. He's the reason I kind of started to watch basketball, and I think it will be excellent to ask him and to talk about which Asian market is the best in America. That being said, Jeremy, call me. I do have a podcast called Rants with Danny Shee. So if you want to come on, my DM is always open. Just to hit up the DMs.
These are all great options. I mean, I there's not one that I wouldn't want to have on a podcast, but I'm going to have to give this one to Nicole. I think I would love to have a sit down with LeBron James himself. I think that'd be pretty sweet. All right, next. The NBA G League has an experimental rule regarding the number of free throws a player will attempt when he goes to the free throw line. Under that rule, one free throw worth 1, 2, or 3 points will be awarded in the event of any foul that would typically result in 1, 2, or 3 free throws being shot under standard NBA rules. The rule does not apply during the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter or the entirety of any overtime period. So, if you were a part of the G League's research and development team, what would be your rule change idea to improve the game of basketball? Anybody can jump in.
No timeouts in the last 2 minutes. I hate the last 2 minutes of a basketball game. Timeouts, fouls, timeouts. I mean, like 2 minutes of game time spent like an hour. I hated it when I was a little kid. That's why I didn't watch basketball till Jeremy Lin got hot. Yeah, I mean, it's just boring to watch. I'm sorry, just the last 2 minutes of a close game. It's supposed to be a fun last couple minutes of a very close game, but no, they're just gonna foul, and we're just gonna watch people shoot free throws at the free throw line. Sometimes when you're watching Texas, they're not even making them. So,
for me, it would be the goaltending rule. I hate the goaltending rule. If you're tall enough to reach up there and swat the ball away, you go for it. Plus, half the time they call it, and it's not actually goaltending. I think they should just get rid of it in general, remove all the gray area, just let them score if they want. If you can hit it, then that's on you.
If you're up, you're up.
Yep, if you're up, you're up.
Nicole, what about you?
I say clarify and or enforce the clear path foul rules. You just see so often that there's a 2-on-1, 3-on-1, or someone's driving to the basket and they have an open shot, and then defense is just lazy and will just foul. And half the time it should be counted as a clear path violation, but instead it just sends people to the line. I think it's just making defense lazy, and it's not as fun to watch.
Yeah, it is kind of lazy, but I think I'm gonna have to give this one to Daniel. I think that if you didn't have fouls in the last 2 minutes, it would be a lot more exciting and less it would go by faster too. So you're not just sitting on your hands the entire time waiting for the thing to end. So Daniel, you're gonna get the points on that one. And our final question of the night, the NBA All-Star Game this year will look a bit different, like we mentioned. For the first time ever, All-Star Weekend will change to one day with all the events being on Sunday. So the skills challenge, the three-point contest, and the slam dunk contest will all take place starting at 5 p.m. Eastern time until the end of the actual All-Star Game itself. A crowd favorite is always the slam dunk contest. From jumping over people to jumping over cars to doing flips and much more, there's a lot of creativity in these performances. That being said, what would your ideal dunk contest performance look like?
Oh, I'm going to take it first on this one. For me, I think that we should have a one-on-one competition, dunks only. That's your only way that you can score. You got to dunk it or it doesn't count. I think that would just be epic. You got to just drive in the rim, slam it in there. That's it.
That's all. Simple. Okay.
I feel like it would be cool if you have two players dunk at the same time, but on different side of the court. You know how one right now is half court, and you have to watch, you have to wait till this person does it, and then your favorite player goes on. I think obviously it will look a lot better in the arena, which won't happen in the near future, but just watch both at the same time. I think that kind of comparison would be a lot better for the judges as well.
Interesting. Up here. Okay.
All right. I say add another competition. Might even need another league for this one, but deregulate all performance-enhancing drugs. Just see how high these people can jump.
Add a trampoline while at it too.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be pretty crazy.
That'd be fun, yeah.
It reminds me of those like bands that like people used to think like, oh, like if I put this like, performance band on, I'm going to jump like higher. And then you really thought it worked, but it probably didn't. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I kind of like the simple route with Sydney there. Just kind of like dunk it in there, see how it goes. I mean, just make it simple, easy. There it is. It's still exciting. It gets the job done. Yeah. So I like that one. And that being said, tonight's winner is also Sydney. So congratulations on your first Crossfire debut and the win. That being said, it's time for FaceTime. So go ahead, give a shout out to anyone you want to say hi to. Could be famous, could be not.
Yeah, thank you to all my family and friends watching. I appreciate you guys. Want to give a shout out to U.S. Women's National Team winning the She Believes Cup this week and NWSL preseason starting now. So lots of women's soccer to tune into pretty soon. So thank you guys so much for having me.
Amazing, amazing stuff. And thank you guys for tuning in to tonight's episode of College Crossfire. Don't forget to follow us on social media at TSTV Sports on Twitter and Instagram. Lastly, be sure to wake up with the 1-0 Sports Show Friday mornings at 10 a.m. From all of the panelists in our virtual studio and our virtual master control, I'm Jaxie Pigeon. Have a wonderful evening.